I want to remind old people and new people alike, here and in other places. Again, I want to remind you, I am not a doctor. This is not medical or psychiatric treatment. This is no substitute for any medical. And I'm making the difference of saying medical or psychiatric or psychological treatment just because that's the way life still arranges. It's all the same thing. But I want to tell you people, I don't care how long you've been around here, and this is for you new people that maybe you're seeing this on some new or spasmodic basis. This is in no way any substitute for medical treatment. If you are in some way, just by your own definition, by your friend's definition, by your family's definition, if you feel as though you need to be under some medical care, whether it's called psychiatric care, psychological care, it's all the same. This is no substitute for it at all. None. Even if you're going to try and pursue this, you have got to at least bring yourself, if it's going to be profitable at all, you've got to bring yourself up to city speed, up to the ordinary level. And any of you who think that I kick around psychiatry any worse than I do everything else, from our viewpoint, I do not. If anything, you need a shortcut nowadays. Psychiatry and the so-called mental health industry profession is getting a little more efficient in that you have now, from what I hear, a fairly easy time of finding psychiatrists who will just jump right in and don't talk. They prescribe, because that's what it is. You have some chemical, electrical imbalance, if indeed you are suffering from what is known as some mental disorder, some mental malady. This is not a cure for any of that. None, 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 none. And don't any of you people ever abandon any kind of medical treatment that you may be undertaking. Do not drop it and think that this is a substitute, or think that you should be able to overcome it. You can't deal in should. You got to deal in getting yourself up to at least city speed. All of you remember that, because every now and then I find out that there are people who are trying to slip through the cracks regarding this, and I have to put a stop to it. Because if you're sick, there's just no difference, and you ought to be capable of understanding this on your own by now. There is no difference between what is referred to as some mental problem as there is a liver problem. And unless you knew how to, as they call it, treat yourself through some personal means, you would not stop taking medication if your liver was malfunctioning. Do not abandon treatment if you were taking some sort of psychotic drug. Do not abandon it on the basis, I'm talking about, of course, some prescribed drug, not something that you got from Dr. Diehard down the street in the alley. Do not abandon treatment of any kind just because you think you're involved with this and that it should not be that way. If it should not be that way, the day will come that you'll understand it, but you cannot fake it. You can only do that in the musical world, where it doesn't matter much when somebody gives you a request and you think, well, I know a few bars of that, and you can fake it. But you can't start faking around with your health. This is no substitute. And one other thing. This continues to pop up since these tapes are being shown almost with an open door policy in other cities, and people are just wandering in off the street seeing them. Sometimes this works itself out, but let me go ahead and give you people who might be just seeing this for the first, second, or a few times. It can work itself out unless I have some reason to send word for you not to show up, any of you new people. You can, but let me say this. If you walk in off the street and see one of these tapes, and just right off the bat you don't take to me, my advice is to take off. Really. If you walk in and you see some of this, no matter that you might like some of what you hear, if for any reason, whatever the reason, if just seeing me on tape you just don't like me, the cut of my jib, anything, the way I look, the way I talk, believe me, at least save yourself postage, don't write me and tell me. Save me from having to read it. Plus you save yourself a quarter or whatever it is. I am relatively serious. If you don't like me, my advice is just abandon it, because I have seen it work itself out. But if I annoy you so much that you feel inclined to write me right off the bat, then you and I together are probably up to no collective good. You can just about take my word for it that you'll never get over that. And it happens. And one other thing, while I'm doing, I evidently have not stated this clearly enough for some of you people, or you missed it. You people that are really involved with this, that believe you are, I want to tell you what, I don't associate with people who hunt and fish and otherwise in any way annoy, much less harm, other creatures. If I hadn't said that straight enough, I'm saying it now. And every now and then I get semi-amazed that something pops up from some of you people that's been around for a while. I don't associate with people like you. It's no goddamn hobby for a real person. Is that plain enough? Here we go. Are we ready? How about start off with another note from history? A fairly condensed and wrapped up kind of quote that goes something like this. Give me an A flat. Life has an observer state the following: that if we are going to understand our present situation, we're not to look at the actual events themselves, but we're going to have to look to the past, which logically produced the state of affairs that we now see. That may be my version, but history books are replete with such ideas. Philosophers, apparent social critics, observers have made such statements, and I just sort of wrapped it up. But for an understanding of our situation, we must not simply look at the events we now see. Maybe some of you, to get it going, maybe you should look at it as a historian saying this. How about even a contemporaneous historian at the time, somebody in the court somewhere, somebody talking to the king, that he's requested information, your opinion, your advice. Good Prime Minister, Noodlehead, what do you say? What would be your advice as the way I should handle affairs vis-a-vis this potential dangerous situation between us and another state? And his head thinker, his main court running partner says, for us to understand our situation, we cannot, Your Grace, simply look at the events, the actual events we now see, but we must turn our attention to the past, which logically produced the current state of affairs. Now that wraps up a good intellectual part of human history coming through life, the attitude of how to understand not just those simple matters now, which would still hold true, these people would tell you that's been driven to say this, but on a wider range, a more complex area about how did our state, how did our nation, how did us as a people get to this position. And life has somebody in authority, somebody that has a certain amount of respect and affect on the energy interchange going on at that time that stands up, has an effect on a large number of talking molecules, other people, and makes this statement that you cannot simply stand here now and look at the events we see. They would suggest that is for simpletons. That if we're going to have any understanding, we have got to look to the past, which logically produced this present state of affairs. All right. Do you begin to see that as long as life can keep you so involved and so entangled that you'll forever be captive of old intelligence? You can be educated, but you will be operating at old intelligence. As long as life can keep you in any way affected, which it has, just because you had never muttered that sentence before, or perhaps you don't recall ever reading it from history or your readings, you continually do it. Continually, continually, continually. All you've got to do is have the top end of the nervous system, the part that talks, in operation, which all of you do. Then you, by and large, operate on that basis, especially when it seems that it's required for you to make some insightful, spontaneous, at the moment, peering into what's going on. That in some way this is getting too sticky, it's getting too perhaps even complex, and I've got to take some kind of action. But you look at what's going on, and it's as though you had your own prime minister says, well, you can't simply look at the present state of affairs and understand what's going on. And right away, he's got your attention because that was your feeling already. He just enunciated it for you. There you stood. And he says, well, some of the tacit parts of my wrap-up would be like this. An intelligent person, your lordship, your grace. An intelligent person knows that you cannot understand the present state of affairs simply by looking at what you can now see. And as soon as he says that, the king and everybody else goes, yeah. You know, I was about to say the same thing. I was a little confused. It needs further work here, doesn't it? And this guy says, yeah, this voice. Yes, it does. And here's the further work. Is you can't simply look at this. That's why it doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't immediately explain itself, does it? And the king and everybody goes, well, the king, of course, checks that everybody else is going to agree. And he goes, well, there is a little doubt here. Some areas are a bit cloudy. And now all the people go, we're going to say the same thing. And so this other voice says, so you cannot simply look at the events as we now see them. You have got to look to the past, which logically produced this present state of affairs. And the king and everybody else says, I was going to say that. That's exactly what I was going to say. And so everyone goes, remembering my little cross of time to draw it two-dimensionally, that you're always looking back to you people's left. I'm calling that the past, and that's the apparent linear future. And so when he says we've got to look to the past to make this, that logically produced all this, for it to make any sense, and everybody goes, yes, my feelings, I was going to say it. And so everyone intellectually goes, which I could suggest to you, Kyrut pointed out that we have made progress since Egyptian times, when obviously, so back then people could only stand sideways like this. And I guess even after Kyrut pointed that out, some of you thought that perhaps it had something to do with their painting techniques back then. Maybe it did, but how about this? Maybe it didn't. Maybe they were painting what they really thought back then, that there was only two directions. That way, and another one is that way. And that's it. If you're going to understand anything, they were just at a little more simplistic level. They had it down to where it started. It was still down to where it started, that is, two. Not even the illusion of three-dimensional. But at any rate. But at any rate. Somebody write, I like that, but at any rate. As long as life can continue to drive your intelligence in such a way that even without you talking to yourself or verbally agreeing to the statement that I made, the historical observation that I was doing, that is the way in which your ordinary intelligence is operating. This comes out, do I have to prove it? Do I have to not prove it but point out you do it all the time? Is you're continually taking into account what happened before. How could somebody treat me this way? Well, let's see. I did cheat him out of $20 once. Or I did forget her birthday 2 years ago. Well, she's done this to me before. Or he's always been that way. He did that to my brother, so now it's my turn. That is the explanation. There is the historical, even if it's on an individual level, there is the historical attempt to find the logical progression from the past that produced what's going on now. How could he or she have done this to me? And everyone, of course, I'm verbally stretching what people actually do. But this is what it amounts to describe it in human terms. How could they do this to me? And you look, and my opening statement fits right in. That is, you look at it, and from looking at events as they now are, from what you can see, no understanding comes forward. So, where are we going to look? What we've got to do is look at least a little further back, the past, but look a little further back, which logically produced what's going on now. There is the answer, because I am looking at it now, and I cannot divine any reason, any logic. I cannot understand what's going on. So what's your alternative if you're ordinary? What's your alternative? Well, you're certainly not going to try and look in the future. Well, I'll look into tomorrow. Let me see if I can contemplate tomorrow and see what caused it. You can't do that. And you've already cut out what seems to be the present, where I make my little cross line there, because there you stand and you're saying, well, I don't understand this. This makes no sense. Not only through the process of elimination are you left to the past, but the statement itself of saying that we must look to the past to understand the present situation from which our present state of affairs logically progressed. Even, you've got two kicks going for it, that through the process of elimination you've got to look to the past. You're going to look at it that way. Another way is to hear the idea, and ordinary intelligence just goes yes. Inasmuch as it does not reveal itself now, I must look to the past. That's enough of the preface. But not enough of you heard it when I first tried to introduce where I was pointing. That is, as long as you operate on that basis, life has got you. Or if you want to look at it another way, as long as you operate on that basis, as long as you will continue to entertain that is the way to do it. You just automatically assume it is. You accept it is. As long as you do that, you will be the proud recipient. You will continue to hold, dear, cherish, protect, honor, obey old intelligence. Nothing new will reveal itself. You will understand nothing new. It is a continual process of I'm attempting to understand. And I'm attempting to understand in the only way possible. And life is, right. The only way possible. Because you cannot look to the events as we now see them. You must look to the past, which logically produced the current state of affairs. If life could keep everyone operating on that basis, then this would not be taking place, activities such as this. If that was correct, then you do realize that everything I've ever said, other than, hey, how are you? And I've never said that. But other than that, everything else would be fatally flawed. In other words, everything I ever said would be wrong. It'd be worse than wrong. It'd be incorrect. Because what everyone else believes, the way in which everyone else thinks, would be correct. That everything that you think that I had ever stuck a stick at, pointed my finger at, tried to get you to see from a new alternative position, would all have been an absolute waste of time. Because everything that you felt before you ever got involved with this, everything that you thought would have been correct. If you look in the mirror and you look sad, and if I popped up behind a fern in your bathroom and said, "Why are you looking sad?" You could say, "Well, I don't know, I was sad in the past. I've always been a little sad kid. My mother was sad, and so I'm sad." That's it. And if you had said, "Why?" I'd say, "Well, no reason. I just asked." Why are you such a shy person? My father was real overbearing. I was going to say that. I should have known that. Why are you always looking fearful? Both of my parents died at an early age, and I've just felt like that there was some kind of curse on our family, and I'm just all the time I'm afraid something's going to happen. There's nothing to say. That's it. It's a wrap. Close the book, go home. If the past, as ordinary intelligence can perceive it, is the logical progenitor of everything going on. And logical, of course, I don't mean in the strict intellectual sense. That is, that there is a progression that ordinary intelligence could see, such as when my father was overbearing. My father, in fact, wanted a girl. That's why he named me Gladys. Think about this. But the way he treated me, no wonder I'm shy. That makes every sense in the world. What else would you want? Why are you shy, young man? My father was so overbearing, and he gives you 2 or 3 minutes worth of descriptions. Maybe some photographs of his father being overbearing. And if you got the ordinary intelligence, the old intelligence, the same way that this person has, they tell you the story. That's it. What else? Where else can you look? It did produce it. Who's going to say it didn't? How are you going to take a young, impressionable, Sub Rosa child's brain and little soul and bear over it without it reacting in such a way that it's very likely it will come out shy? What is there to say after that? Well, you keep saying the same thing over and over. All you experience from that level in the city is what I've been referring to as some success. But it is accepted as being the approach. That is the way to think, even if it does not seem continually absolutely satisfying. There is no alternative. That is logical. You don't even have to go to college. You don't have to have ever taken a quarter of symbolic logic or philosophy. That is logical. My father was a drunk and beat me. No wonder I'm so aggressive. Now, see, we're talking about somebody else. The other guy was shy because his father was overbearing. But I'm not making fun of this. It makes just as much sense. This guy describes his father, this second guy, in almost the same kind of terms. My father wanted a son, and I'm a son. But he was mad as hell because I'm so short. My father's 6'3", my brother is all over 6, and I'm only 5'9". And that's all I heard. I've about had it with life, too. I don't take any shit. Somebody referred to me as short, they're going to have to whip my ass. But he's describing the same kind of thing, an overbearing father. But now this guy says, and some people think I'm a little testy. I guess maybe I can be. But I'm telling you, my father used to come in 2 or 3 times a week, and he'd look at me and say 5'9", and just slap the shit out of me. No wonder I'm hot. All right? Do you see, at that level of old intelligence, ordinary intelligence, that is logical. What else are you going to say? Somebody in the family might say, well, you ought to try to go talk to a psychiatrist, or you ought to do something. But the point is, there seems to be the logical explanation. There seems to be the progression from where? The past. Because you can't look at the events now. You just turn around to this man number 2. You just meet him somewhere. And just after a few minutes you find out he is just testy as hell. And you ask him, what happened? Because you look at him now, and how can you explain somebody testy as hell? That you just met the guy and you're staying at a donut counter, and he's just on the verge of coming apart. He's almost frightening to you, and you don't see anything going on, and you try to talk to him, and he says, well, not that it's any of your business, but my father for years just beat the crap out of me and picked on me because I was 5'9". There is the answer as far as it goes. Because there you stand and you cannot look at the events as they present themselves now. That is, that there you stand with this guy and you meet him for a second. Would you pass me the sugar? And you say a few words and you find out he's just bad-mouthing everybody. You can feel the tension in the guy. And you're looking and you don't know what caused it. He looks all right. The present events do not reveal any understanding on an individual level, or as I started this out, on a historical level. That the guy says, we cannot explain our positions, Your Highness, on the basis of the events as they now present themselves. All of the intrigue that's been going on for years between our state and this other state. You cannot look at things as they are now. You can't understand anything from that. You have got to look to the past, because all these things built themselves up, becoming more and more complex, becoming more and more intertwined, intermingled, turning back on itself. You've got to understand, you've got to look to the past and study it. Then, and only then, perhaps some of these current events, these present affairs, may begin to make a little sense. What could sound more intelligent than that? You could die right now after going through what I just did, and people around you, ordinary people, think, that son of a gun, he was sharp. Because there he stood. He was saying, look, sometimes you can understand a few things, and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes down to trying to understand the nature of human affairs, all the way from an individual to a nation, even a family, and everything in between, you can't simply look at what's going on now. We have got thousands of years of individual evolution. Nations have been going on, groups of people, races of people, identifiable for thousands of years, and the wars they've had, the interminglings, the intermarriages they've had with other nations, other races, the fights they've had, the fallings out, just like in a family. And then to look at some group of people, a nation, a religion, a race, an individual, and to look at the complexity, oftentimes the ambiguities, the uncertainties, even actions and behaviors and theories that seem to be even self-defeating, and you think, how can this be? You can't understand it. Not simply by looking at this. You have got to look to the past. You've got to study. You've got to consider the years of human life, the complexities, the interchanges that brought about this affair. And then you die, and the people would say, God, that guy had a brain. Somebody would think that you've got to do all that just to have some notion of what's going on now. It is beautiful. As long as life can keep that going, it's doing what it wants to. But as long as you stay in that position, then you're never going to get a real fix on what this is about. You're not surprised to hear me say that, even if it doesn't make any sense right now. Let me put it to you this way. How about this? If it were true that the only way to understand what's going on is in a detailed, continual, deep study of past events. All right, let's assume that's true for a sec. Surely you see this. You may not like it, but you've got to see this. If that's true, you're not going to be around long enough to understand much of anything. Now, you may have a good hobby. You may get a job as professional studier, ponderer, teacher, professor. But if that indeed is true, and to understand one little thing, as it now seems to be, that you have got to study, that you have personally got to look to the past, and all of these complexities, all of the possibles, the improbables, the imponderables, and the ponderables, All that's happened, and to see that as being the logical, the inalterable, the inescapable progenitors of what's going on now, you do understand you're not going to live long enough to do anything. That's just one way to look at it. That's not really the fact, because you could live twice as long and you wouldn't understand anymore if you're ordinary. You'd just be twice as pissed off and bored with the whole thing. But even if it were true, to understand one little thing that you had to look to the past, it just wouldn't work. You don't have enough time. The opposite, of course, is not the answer either, but I guess all of you assume that I would finally say a little something, that the way you can look at what's going on now is in an alternative manner, because there is information insofar as the actual events as they present themselves now, that my fictitious prime minister in the beginning said you cannot look at the actual events as they are now, blah, 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 blah. If you can't, what you going to do? You're not going to live long enough to do anything else. If there is not information laying right out there, right in front of you, that you're not presently getting, then all of this is flawed, to say the least. I'm being charitable. All of this is just a silly illusion. I'm Chuck Jones or Walt Disney's or Woody Woodpecker's evil twin brother. This is all just silly. It's just ridiculous. Because it's not a matter of studying the past of how it brought things here. But notice, as long as you operate on that basis, and what's today's version? To bring you right up to date. You don't have to appear to be someone stuck into a kind of low-level religious or crude spiritual or ties to bygone days, because to be right to date now is simply on the basis that everything that happens, from individuals on up to the sociological level of talking about large groups of people, is on the basis of influences of the past, recognized and conscious, unrecognized and subconscious. That is the only explanation, that's the only intelligent approach that any modern sophisticated person will take. That you cannot explain, or you can't understand everything from criminal behavior to deviant sexual behavior to personality quirks to phobias to manias. You can't understand any of that. It makes no sense whatsoever unless you're at least intelligent and sophisticated enough by now to realize that it is in the past. It's what's happened to a person. We're not here to lay blame, but you can't look at what a person is right now and expect to understand them. You've got to know what happened to them, because that's what made them what they are. And if life was engaged in such a iffy task, then every time you did that, life would go, phew, safe another day. Because you are not going to understand anything else. And all it's got to do is keep you operating on what seems to be, what you think to be, the intelligent level, which is what I started out quoting, that is the intelligent approach. There is no way that you can consider man, humanity, or an individual man, there's no way that you can consider a man has any extraordinary intelligence until he has at least reached a level that he comfortably sees that talk, thinking of action, that both of those, if you don't see them as, for a minute, two aspects of the same thing, you have got to be able to see comfortably yourself that they are both specific energy conversions. And furthermore, you have got to be able to properly perceive the graduations of simplicity through complexity therein. And beyond that, you have got to see talk planning, thinking of action for what it is, and then you have got to see it and use it for what it is not. As long as you do not understand yourself, the distinction, you end up with a kind of strangulation. Let me run back through that, since I even complicated it as I ran through it. You've got to even be anything resembling an intelligent person, much less to try and draw away from the old level. You have got to yourself comfortably see that talk is in no way per se good or bad. Talk and thinking of action, even if you're not talking out loud, that you're talking to you, that both of those are specific, active conversions of energy, no matter what is the context, as they call it in the city, of what's being said, whether it's gibberish, whether it's in French, Swahili, German, whether you personally like what's being said, whether you agree with what's being said, whether you're offended by what's being said, it is all conversion of energy. And no man, humanity, is not intelligent at any level until man understands that. We'll turn the tape over. All right, that was the first part that I was running all together. And then talk itself, you've got to see yourself, how about from what I was drawing last time, a kind of levels of complexity. Extremely simple, moderately simple, simplistic, simple, complex, moderately complex, extremely complex, for instance. That within talk there are graduations. You could look at simplistic talk as, fuck you! It's right to the point. Or you ask somebody something, hey, can I do so-and-so? No! It's not just the context, which was, I had it down to a one-word, two-letter word. So looked at context-wise, you might look at it as simplistic, but it's more than that. It is not a complex transfer and conversion of energy. Somebody says, let me ask you a question. All right. Can I do? Well, da-da-da-da-da-da. No! Or yes. Within the framework, and this is not just the context now, it's not just what appears to be the verbal human intent. Because I repeat to you, it can be gibberish. Somebody can holler, fuck you, in a foreign language, and if you just got walking around city intelligence, you're going to strongly suspect that the person did not wish you a happy day. You can feel it. You don't have to know the word. You have got to begin to see, and it's nothing to study, it's just there, that there are graduated levels in which the energy being converted and transferred from one person to another via talk can be all the way from very simplistic, such as no, to, all right, I understand what you're asking. And there's several conditions, there's several possibilities, situations that immediately come to my mind that you ask about. And two of them, I would say that yes, I'd be agreeable to them if you want me to tell you which situations. But right past one point that I can already think about, just immediately, I'm going to have to tell you that I would have serious difficulty if you were to do that. That's more complex. Forget what the hell I'm talking about. I just made up as I went along. But instead of saying no to whatever the question was, the person said, can I do, and I need your help, would you do? And the guy says, well, just immediately, I see several possibilities that could arise here. Two of them, I have no difficulty with you doing what you're suggesting. Do you understand? It doesn't even really matter what I'm talking about. The energy conversion is more complex. It's more time consuming in the 3D world. There are more conditions on it. There are alternatives pointed out. The energy being converted is more complex. You have got to begin to understand that. It goes on. People do it on you, and you can use this. You can use this to protect yourself. You can use this as far as it's possible to fool around the city to try and expedite some of what you do. And of course, some of it I've just pointed out, and through Kairoot and other places, are just kind of direct behavioral things about talk less. I just never put it in that way, as get down and deal as far as you can with, and in this case, simplistic energy is not a pejorative observation of the energy, because there are times that you have got to deal with more complex verbiage. But I have been suggesting to you for how many months and years that most of what people do, from a revolutionist sense, from somebody attempting to begin to use energy in their own particular way for their own purpose, that most people who would aspire to be whatever a revolutionist is, talk too much. That when you go ba 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 ba, you could have said no. Or always the good old, possible. The energy at the time of the situation that needed to be converted and transferred would have, but it was to your benefit not to get involved with what would appear to be a more complex energy transfer, because of what benefit was it to you? Now you can't answer that, except those of you who can hear me already from what you've done throughout your own experience with this, that there are times that you do understand, that you should be able to hear me, that there are times when I talked more and I understood less. There are times I talked so much trying to be helpful, they ended up and I felt tired. I felt like that I had given somebody that asked me to lend them $1. I feel like I ended up and I lent them $400, plus gave them my credit card and wrote them a post-dated check. I left feeling like somebody had sucked my brains out. What you should have done was say, possible, instead of talking to them for 4 hours. Or else, if possible didn't seem to get it, say no. Or say, I'll be right back, and leave and don't come back. Call me later and don't be in. Another aspect that I felt that I sort of clouded up when I started, the third aspect of this is I wanted to point out that you have got to, beyond the simplistic, the levels of simplicity going into the more complex ways in which energy is converted, is you have got to be able to see, you've got to be able to accept, and to use talk and thinking of action for what it is. But then you've got to be able not to waste your life, not to get strangled by trying to deal with talk and thinking of action for what it is not. And for what it is not is action. But in the city, thinking of action, there is no clear distinction. You all know that. I keep talking about the city. Hell, there's the city. I've had Kairoot of late do several things. You remember a night or so ago that the father that was sending off his son to city school for the first time. So I'll give you an idea what the city is about. Almost all the schools and universities, all of them, their fight song is, dun, da, dun, da, dun, we surrender. That's the city. I could give you another version of that. What is an eternal cry in the city? When confronted with lack of action. Somebody says, you told me you were going to do so-and-so. Well, I know, and I still mean it. But it hadn't been done. But I said I'd do it! That sounds as though it's the end of a sentence. It sounds as though there's a conclusion. And the person says, no. No. It hasn't been done. Of course, I hope this guy's not too tested, I'm fixing to do. He said, God damn it, I told you I would do it. Now lay off of me. We won't ask for a show of hands of who's ever done that over 1,000 times in your life. What is actually going on? What they're doing is replacing action for thinking of action. In the city now, under ordinary conditions, nothing's wrong. That's the way things are supposed to go. But you cannot continually do that. Action is one thing, thinking of action is another. The thinking of action, if it's not going on between two people, it's going on in you. If it's not coming out as overt talk, it's going on in you. But thinking of action is not action. That's the basis of some of the times that you laugh when I do these things about, well, somebody decides, I think I'll lose weight. So what's the first thing they do? Find a club to join. I think I'll quit smoking. So what's the first thing they do? Not only find a club or an organization to help you quit smoking, but one that lets you smoke when you first start, that you can smoke at the meeting. And you laugh, ha ha. It is. But in the city, that's fine. I say it's fine. They don't need my agreement. You understand that's the way things work. But you have a continual overlapping of the distinction that I've been making, that all of you can see quite clearly when I say it, that there is action and there's thinking of action. That's all you can do. And you can see that. If I got to go back and remind you people, everybody saw that the first night I ever brought that up. No other creature that you can see on this planet, no other creature in the 3D world has the possibility, the dual possibilities. Everything else acts. Well, either acts or don't act, which is the same thing. Humans have the other alternative. Not only can they act, they can think of acting. I can, from a certain not incorrect view, point out that that is the operational description of human intelligence. That that's the only way that humans have evolved, if that was the only difference between us and possums and beavers and the ever-popular Ottoman Empire. I know it wasn't a creature. It was a mineral. You can see that quite clearly. Among other things, it is a beautiful little map. That is the distinction, one of the good operational maps between you and every other creature that you can now perceive. And you can see that that is the function. That is the operational description and function of human intelligence. And it's also, beyond just the strictly intelligent, it would appear to be, from another view, if you can see it very quickly, the kind of civilizing effect that had to do with the animal passions of man. That men are the only creatures that, instead of a big moose during the horny season comes over, if you're a male moose, which is the only kind of moose, and he gets too close to your territory, instead of you guys perhaps fighting to the death, human mooses and human mises, a human moose can think about, well, that sucker's got a good 200 pounds on me. And I know that those photographers over there from the National Geographic expect me to run out there and lock horns. But here's what I believe I'll do. I believe I'll kind of cough like I didn't see him, or like I don't feel too good, and I'll go off. Perhaps that moose has read that great Northeastern American philosopher James Thurber. Those who fight and run away live to fight another day. Although I have it on good authority, he stole that from a Greek. But at any rate, no other creature can do that. They just act. That's it. But humans you can look at as being everything from a civilizing influence, instead of men killing each other, that a man can sit and think about action. He can think about killing the guy for what he just did, but then he can think about this. All right, if I kill him, his family's going to catch me and they'll kill me. Or our little government's going to catch me. Or if I try to kill the guy right now, what good will it do? I know I'm mad, but actually what profit will it be to me to kill that guy and get this stirred up any worse? A man can do that. Thinking of action. And it is a form of action. It is a form always of energy transfer. Everything you do is converting energy. But now once you see that map, and it has a very firm and it has an exhilarating, enlightening effect to use it, then you've got to see this, that to do things out of the ordinary, you've got to operate on the basis, the correct basis, not for everybody, but for a few people, that there is a distinct time to think of acting, not at the city level, because at the city level, whenever you think of acting, you're supposed to have thought of acting. Whenever you act, you're supposed to have acted. But to try and begin to use this, to comfortably, personally see it, and then you use it, that there are times that I should act for no reason that I could explain. It's not because society told me to, it's not because of ordinary fear, and etc. And then there are times that I should think of acting. But they are two distinct things to the revolutionist. When one is in order, it's in order. When the other one's in order, it's in order. And when one of them was in order to a revolutionist, and you do the other one, you'll know it. Now, enough of you have written me things in the past and told me non-verbally such matters as this, that when you talk too much or you try to tell people things you don't know about at times, you feel like that you have swallowed a very unsavory object, and you feel like you'd like to go out and rake your tongue, that you wish you had not done that. I tell you something worse, though. It's what I just described. It's to not act when you should have acted. Because rather than that you wish you had not said something and that you wish you could go back and pour gasoline on your tongue, clean off your tongue, now what you're left with is you have to go back, your feeling is you'd like to go back and clean off your entire being. Because when a revolutionist should act, there is absolutely no substitute. There's just nothing to say. You can't explain it. You can't go back. You'll want to. Consciousness will do this. It's a kind of stabilizing, sanitizing aspect of ordinary consciousness that you will fall right back, unless you exert some superhuman effort, you will fall right back into what is normally referred to as rationalization about why you didn't, and now you will sit using thinking of action as the city intended you, of explaining why you did what you did. But a real revolutionist, you can't escape it. You're not supposed to. That kind of feeling makes guilt, you know what they call guilt, good Catholic or Jewish guilt, it's bubble gum. This will make you sick, for no reason that you could tell anybody. Because when you should have acted and you didn't act, and at times when you shouldn't have acted, if you did act, same thing. It's just it does not have what I was suggesting to you, that same sort of very, very inhibiting, morbific effect all over you, all over. So the revolutionist has got to know how to use talk and planning, thinking of action, when it should be used, but to act when acting is the only thing that will suffice. It's the only thing that is proper. Not with ordinary people now, but with a real revolutionist, if the ratio of thinking of acting too far exceeds acting, then one's own thinking becomes a kind of stagnating poison, which I was going to try and get up to this point and then do some questions and sort of leave tonight here, because many of you, I don't mean right this second, but many of you here and in other places been involved with this for a while. You have hit that before, and it's sort of like a runner's wall, I guess, as they call it. You've hit there and you keep bouncing off, and you'll get depressed and you won't show up for a few weeks. You'll suddenly have reasons not to be here, and then sometimes you'll sort of try and bring yourself back to your senses, and you'll write me notes saying, how come I can't do what I know I should do? That's it. You thought that was your question. How come I can't do what I know I should do? Well, the question seems as sincere. It's like you poured out your heart to me. That, all right, you've said enough. I'm convinced I can't ever leave this. And so I know at times what I should do. Why can't I do it? Question mark, and you hand it to me, or you mail it to me. Because what I want to do, if you could do it, is I want to take it right back and put it in an envelope, mail it back to you. And you open it up and think it's my answer, that you read your question. Because what else can I tell you? Why can't I do what I know I should do? Okay, I give. What do I win if I answer this? If I play along, what do I get? Besides heartbreak. Let's look back at the political, my paradigm of the state. The people, at the very least, will ridicule, which can do harm, but all the way from ridicule to actually harm an impotent ruler. Good King Blabbermouth the First. This guy that continues to make pronouncements of what I'm going to do is start this great road project all through our kingdom starting tomorrow, and it never happens. A month later, ridicule to actually harm an impotent ruler. Good King Blabbermouth the First. This guy that continues to make pronouncements of what I'm going to do is start this great road project all through our kingdom starting tomorrow, and it never happens. A month later, nothing said, and he says, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that everyone has a brand new car, or at least a used car. You'll all get a car, I guarantee it. Nothing. All right, you people's got it too easy. Cars and all these good roads. What we're going to do is everybody's going to have to work 2 years here at the palace for the good of all of us. So get ready, I'm going to start drawing names out, and all of you are going to be conscripted to come do some work. Nothing. You do know what would happen to such a man. The people are going to do him serious harm. And serious harm can be ridicule. That is, that they no longer treat him with any respect whatsoever. That doesn't sound familiar at all, does it? The ratio between thinking of acting and acting. When everybody that's out of balance, that's part of what being alive is. Even at the city, the ratio is always out of balance. That is, in the city it's not out of balance because it's just right, whatever it is. But the thing is, there is no balance in nature. It's not that people 50% of the time think of acting and then 50% of the time act. But it's not that every time somebody thinks of acting, they do the appropriate act. That's not the basis of the city. But with the revolutionist, this is true over a wide range, I'll just call your entire life, at least since you started living. And it's true in little small ranges. It could be true within a matter of 2 or 3 minutes or an hour of what seems to be to you a situation. That with you there is a balance. There is a ratio between thinking of acting and acting. And when the ratio of thinking and acting gets too far in excess of acting, it is a form of poison. It is definitely stagnating. And as everything else under the great benevolent rules as laid down by Professor Newton, once you begin to stagnate, you tend to what? Continue to stagnate. And if you're really good, you what? Well, I even in beginning to stagnate at an increased rate of speed. It is a form of poison. Well, I wanted to get some of these questions. That's a good thing about being king. If I want to, I will. Oh, yeah? Okay. You people just seeing these, I've been taking in questions, soliciting them from here and out of town. You people that are apparently presented on the basis of very practical, everyday stuff. And I'm answering on a very direct, everyday basis. And I'm answering on the basis of would-be rural revolutionists, whatever the hell I mean by that, because it has known results to do this, but if any of you new people that just came in, if you heard some of this and thought, well, hey, that sounds neat, if you go try this in similar situations, the known result is by no means guaranteed, which is an understatement. Being forewarned and recalling that I am not Freud reincarnated, and I'm not Miss Manners, and I'm not Abigail Van Buren, or her brother president. All right. God, the first three are sex. All right. All in a row. How does a 30-plus female stop noticing red circuit signs of aging and being bugged by them? What can a 30-plus female say when asked about her age and etc. without making a big deal out of it? All right. This is one of the things I gave out very specifically to start with several times in the past that perhaps some of you newer people have never heard, but I'm going to tell you that if I were going to establish some absolute rules, besides the little few that we've got, of things to do, or if I could grab you and say, as your best unknown friend, let me tell you something. Let me give you the strongest possible suggestion. Now let me just go ahead and let me tell you some things not to do. And one of them, by God, is don't ever mention your age. Now there's a few of you around here that young enough that doesn't mean crap. And so if it doesn't, just assume it's because of your age. Must because you hadn't reached the age where it means crap. But any of you that have any idea that you ever think about, age, now I don't care what age you are, you don't have to explain it. You should never mention your age. You should never mention your health. But specifically, don't ever mention your age. Not just specifically your age, don't ever say anything about, well, when you get my age, you can't. Don't ever do that. Never, 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 never. And as far as letting somebody else, the person asking, how can I keep from responding, does everybody notice I keep getting these questions? Well, under different guises of people saying, well, how can I refuse to talk about myself? There you are. All right, I'll go back to it. No, I'll go back and do it again. I'm telling you, I'm not being funny, because this is the kind of thing that is, the only reason I sort of drag it out is to make you see, or to try to help you to see that once I do point it out and you see it, that it makes you want to go, Jesus, yeah, I could have thought of that. Except you didn't, because you're wondering, well, what makes me like this? And you're studying the historical significance, looking to the past of, what makes people like this? I'm going to tell you, forget all that. The questions about how do I stop somebody, if somebody asks about my age, how can I not talk about it without making a bigger deal out of it, or by appearing coy or vain? Anytime you're dealing with people and somebody asks you something you don't answer, your age or anything, all you got to do is turn questions back on them. The way to do it, I'll tell you again, if you know how to do it. You got to watch this. It's not all that tricky. It's not going to get you killed. But the most efficient way, if you know how to do it, is to directly, no matter what the question's about, is to say, well, why do you ask? That is the beginning, if not the end, but that's the beginning of the end of a certain energy transfer between you and that other person. And they can say, well, I don't know, several people are talking about age over there, and I wonder what your age is. And I was just wondering how old you are. Why? Well, I thought maybe that, well, I'd guessed your age before. I guess I was thinking about it, and I thought maybe that I'd guessed too far. Really? Which is a question. You say, really? Well, would you tell me? Well, why do you want to know? What good will it do? That is one way. The other way that is usually the easiest I found with you people throughout my job in this, my time in this position, is you just simply turn the question not necessarily back on them about why do you want to know, but you can just change the subject as long as you ask them something about themselves. That is, you do not respond. Somebody says, how old are you? And you can say, you know, that's interesting, because we were talking about nobody could believe how young you could look year after year. And we were asking, how in the world does she do that? Now, you can forget the person asking you about how old you are. That's it. All of you laughing, you hear the truth of it. If you don't, go try it if you got any doubt. All you got to do is change the kind of subject back on any human in the city. I don't care whether they just won the prize for Mr. or Ms. Humble of 1989. Mrs. Shy, retiring. If somebody asks you a question about you, all you have to do is turn it back on them. throw in a little bit that sounds complimentary like I just did. And that's the end of the subject. So how can you say, any of you, continually to say, well, I hear some of this, and I try not to talk about myself or my health, but when somebody asks me outright, and I stand there, what can I say? I just told you. Have you been feeling well lately? You know, that's interesting that you asked me. What amazes me, as long as I've known you, I have never seen you appear to be sick. And I've been aiming to ask you all this time, I'm glad you brought it up. What is it about you? There's some kind of inner glow in you. There's some kind of health. And you've taken the person. You ever laid a good, a cat on his back and rub his stomach, or put a chicken's head under his wing, and it goes. Forget about this person being nosy about you. They just suddenly realize what a wonderful person you are. You'll find out how much interest they have in you. It's talk. It's energy conversion. Once you understand that talk is energy conversion specifically, and the content is not it, then you apparently, these questions you continue to give me, that somebody walks up to you and asks you a question, and you believe, well, in some way I got to respond. All right, let's assume you do almost have to respond. But your belief that you in some way have got to respond, that they come up, and here's what it amounts to. It sounds as though a person walks up to you and says, let's do the tango. And that you feel as though, all right, I've got to either do the tango or beg off, and then they're going to say, well, why don't you want tango? That's not it. They say, let's tango. And let's say that you seem to be in a position that you almost got to dance. But what you do is non-verbally you go, I'd be delighted to do that non-verbally, and then you get them, and you begin to whisper in their ear, don't you love a good waltz? And suddenly they're waltzing and loving it because you're saying, I just knew that you would be the world's greatest waltzer. They have forgot all about tango because that wasn't the point. Tango wasn't the point. Dancing was the point. The question about how old are you was not the point. Talk was the point. Energy conversion. And once you understand the uses and the non-uses, the purpose and the avoidable purpose, then you can control it. I'm not saying you can always control. That's not even the point of avoiding the conversation. That is the energy exchange. For instance, if you're a boss, or some of you won't keep your job. If we go back to good, cold examples in the city, that your boss says, I've been aiming to ask you so-and-so, and you feel like, well, I don't want to answer that. The thing is, the boss has said, let's dance. And let's assume that you feel like, I'm not questioning that I got to do a little step with them. That is, I have got to respond. But once you understand what talk's about, you understand that energy itself is the point. And so somebody can say, under conditions that you feel like you cannot decline, that they say, let's dance. And it's as though they say, let's do a merengue. And you can stuff right up. I'd be delighted, Your Highness, boss. You fall right in their arms, but you immediately say, I've always imagined that doing a polka with you would be heaven. And he doesn't know why, but he suddenly, you're doing a polka. And you say, I knew it, I knew it. Look at it that way. It's not a point of you of being able to avoid the dance or the conversation, but for you to put the right kind, as they say nowadays, a spin on it. Is you call the dance. And the way to always do that, always, always, always with anybody, is to, in a complimentary fashion, in an interested fashion, is turn the questions back on them. Simply ask them to talk about themselves, and they'll drop you like a bad habit. Like a handkerchief that's been overdone. That's how fast, because talk, the energy conversion, is the point. How does this said female, 30 plus, etc., go beyond some success in escaping a personal tendency to flirt and to seek infatuation? Well, why should you want to? Is my question. If you're not involved, why should you? Well, we're not talking about in here now, doing that among people that's already tied up and involved with each other. But as far as the general question of escaping the tendency to flirt and seek infatuation, especially a woman asking me this, my question to you is, why would you want to? And unless you're seeing that as a kind of energy defense against the above, of talking about your age, or feeling like that you're tied up in some sort of potentially captive situation because of your age. Also remember this. if I could remind you, person's referring to it as 30-plus female, and everybody's got their own version of this. This is not cultural, it's not sexual. It comes out different in men and women. This is the hormones, this is life running down. And I know it's quite real. And I've seen people that even at the city level, I'm not talking about in here, but at the city level that are quite sane and intelligent, that hit the right age, men and women, and go slightly nuts over this. But it is not psychological, and do not stand there and listen to some prime minister or friend of yours say, well, what we've got to do is look to the past to see what logically brought it here. Hormones brought it here. Life brought it here. If you're going to be a revolutionist, there you are, man or woman, and you begin to feel like these kind of nutsy feelings that, Jesus, I'm 40 or 35 or whatever it is. So, there it is. It jumps on you some morning. Well, what are you going to do? You going to die? Yep. That's for damn sure, but are you going to die because of that? Nope. You're going to worry about? No. How does one stop wanting to impress city folks? Well, that's a long question, all right? To see them for what they are and for what they are not. Next question. Well, different question. It's not, I can't get clear about my own sexuality. All right, I know this is true about several people that are currently involved. It's not all that unusual, but you understand the question. The person just asked you, very straightforward, short. I can't get clear about my own sexuality. I'm going to give you a pretty short and direct answer. That such apparent bewilderment, uncertainty, is the answer to the question. Now, I know I just did a variation of that, but this one is a prime area. Because you understand, all of you can fill in the blanks, the unasked part that the person's asking, that they're not sure, they feel unclear about their sexuality. There's the answer. Uncertainty, the confrontation of it, the being able to perceive the present uncertainty in me at that level, that's the answer. That's not a question, that's the answer. Then, of course, my question is, can you hear such a surprising response? The only place you hear it, or the initial place, would have to be from somebody outside you, like me. But then, it's to be able to do that to yourself, when you apparently have a question that this is serious. I mean, getting down to one's sexuality, you got to see is very serious. There could be other things, but that's about as serious as it comes at that level. And to say, I'm not sure, there's a certain kind of uncertainty in me about my own sexuality. There's the answer. What else do you want? You may not like it. You're finding it frightening. The uncertainty, I would suggest, is what, at the city level, makes people feel that frightened. But anytime you have uncertainty, anytime there is ambiguity, there is the answer. Where else are you going to look? What else do you want to hear? Unless you're going back to the city level, then you only got one or two possible responses. Am I or aren't I? That's no answer. The question was the answer. I am unclear. I'm uncertain. Let me say this, since I'm talking very directly. I'm going to tell you what. This is not a modern phenomenon. It's just taking on modern trappings. But city consciousness makes way, 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 way too much, too big a deal over questions, verbal questions regarding sex. Too big a deal. Sex is sex. Intellectual crosstalk is intellectual crosstalk. But the way it's done in the city, such things as my feelings of uncertainty, they make way, way too big a deal. Because sex is sex, and thinking about sex is thinking about sex. Every day in life, cars get into little accidents. People slip or bump into one another. I find it hard to deal with the inevitable pain of such little things, and of having to slow down, lick my wounds. And when I'm dinged and in little accidents, I have to temporarily suspend doing other things. And then they ask, is it possible that I'll ever get in such a position that I'll never have these little accidents in everyday life? Does everybody get the question? A lot of these I am, as you notice, I assume you can tell I'm editing as I read them. That sort of thing, of feeling as though, let me flesh it in my own way, of somebody feeling as though, and this is true of many of you, that you too often, too continually, have little minor accidents, turning your ankle or hitting your head or catching a cold, whatever it is, but that was the basis of the question, and that it seems to have a greater effect than perhaps the wounds and the little ailments apparently should warrant. And is it possible I ever get free from such things as this? All right. Now listen to me. I'm going to tell you the truth. It is quite possible that literally or physically any one of you that could have asked this may not ever totally become free from such little accidents, but you can refuse to slow down and look at them. Do you hear me? Now, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm not giving you carte blanche to go around from now on and continually get sick or to continually trip and hurt yourself. Because even you know by now, without me having to preach a sermon, that it's not real good to once a week turn your ankle to such, every Monday to where you can't run all week or walk good. Then you just barely get well over the weekend, if you're young enough, and then next Monday you do it again. Even some of you should find that suspect. But insofar as the question, can one expect to ever to ever get free of such as these minor little fender benders and dings, it's possible that any one of you, that some of you will never literally get free from it. That is, that your whole life is going to dramatically change if you've been clumsy most of your life, or whatever you call it yourself, or prone, accident prone. You may not literally, completely free yourself from it. But so what? You're going to die anyway. If you quit looking at it, if you get past the point that you understand that this is something wired up possibly in me, it will change. But insofar as the questions of people saying, will I ever get free? Ever or never, same thing, is really too damn inconclusive for revolutionary information to deal with. It is. To say, I fear that I'll never quit hurting myself sometimes. And you're asking me to assure you. You don't hear me say never. Well, I do sometimes, but you don't hear me. I say it another way. But anything that you can ask at the city level, will I ever get free of worrying about dying? Some of you may not. But if it wasn't that, it'd be some other noise up here. The point is, when you go past there, you don't stop and look at the wreck. Who knows? It could have been somebody you know been hit. Been a stranger been hit. Could have been a man been hit. Been a child been hit. All kinds of possibilities. Here's the point. You could say, well, if it's an older person, and if they appeared that they weren't of my race or religion, I might not care that much. But what if I look down and it was somebody I know? So to you, there's some difference. I got the answer. I just thought about it. Just in case, don't look, period, all right? How's that? Did anybody follow that? The question involving, anytime there's a question of never, will I ever get to the point that I will never feel so-and-so, that I will never think so-and-so? That's not revolutionary type questions. It's too inconclusive in the city to talk about never. They don't know what they're talking about. You can't deal with never. You can deal with this, that every time you pull up, you inch up and you know there's a wreck up there, is don't look. And don't think about, well, maybe it'll bother me a little, maybe it won't. Don't look, period. That'll take care of never. 3 minutes. Jesus! I didn't talk that long. That can't be. It's not my fault. Here's one. Every time I've been going with someone, this is from a woman, I want you to know this, because I was going to answer it a certain way. After I've started taking up with a new guy, say for a few months, and sexually active with the person, with the guy, I continue to build up these fantasy relationships that I start off with, and I have a whole bunch of silent expectations, which are, of course, they say of course, I didn't put that in, that of course are left unfulfilled. And it's a question. Well, trust me, they're asking, what's the basis of this, or what do I have to say? Now, of course, I'm not a woman, but this about building up sexual fantasies having to do with a relationship in general, let me tell you women, and I've got some little knowledge of this. It's just that, there's no doubt that I am not a woman, but I'm aware of this. As far as sexual imagination, I can draw two general distinctions between men and women, and that women do seem to engage in more so of what this person asked me about the relationship in general, where men's imagination toward sex is just directly toward the act itself. It's not fooling around. Men write pornography, for instance. They do not write Gothic love stories. If men are going to write about sex, the novel is, he was staying at a bar and she came up and he said, hey, let's go fuck, and they did. And women, that kind of sexual fantasy, as the person was calling it, will go on for hundreds of pages. that they spread the sexual imagination over a broader range, or like the entire relationship. But with men, it is very specific. As far as another response to this, something I've used with a few of you that asked me before, if you want a real specific something with dealing with such as this, is stop. Just refuse to look at it. You can't stop it, but refuse to look at it. And quit entertaining sexual imagination until further notice. Or if that's too much, if that sounds too much like never, for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks. Don't let any imagination, don't look at it. If you're a woman, even if you're not in bed, but if you're in bed, don't look at any of it. When it starts in you, the same old thing, is just turn your attention, absolutely, if you're not actually fucking, then you can turn your attention to anything like, is the oatmeal ready? But if you're actually in bed and the sexual daydreams come to you, just turn your attention on the fact of who you're with. Just turn your attention physically down to your own sexual activity, your own sex organs. Don't tactile whatever's going on between you and another person. And don't look at the little pornographic fantasy accident. Just don't do it. Try it for 2 weeks. Remember, if we got civilians out there, if you go home and try that, I'm not responsible. Don't send me your discarded husband or wife. I don't want them. Well, all right, we're going to stick on a little more tape. I want to hit some more of these questions right quick. Can we continue to let this roll, Joe? For you people on video, just a few more minutes. I just had a stack of these that I was going to run through fast. I don't mean fast in that I'm shortchanging them, but direct. Complexly simple. Why do we have to have these on audio? I've already forgotten. Never mind. Take care of that, just never mind. See, I don't mind being ignorant. Rolling? People tend to stay away from me in life. They don't seem to dislike me, but they do seem to keep their distance. This has kept me from being able to keep up any kind of permanent or stable love relationship. People just seem to fall away. Is there anything I can do about this? Well, first let me point this out. Everybody hear the question. At the ordinary level, we'll assume that what this person's talking about. They're not talking about being involved with this, but just out in life. At the ordinary level, back in the city, just ordinary people, life has wired people up in such a way that they just, by and large, they properly perceive and acceptably recognize various possible ways that other people are wired up, in that they can recognize in potential energy exchanges people who want to be left at a distance. Now I get too convoluted. The person says, people tend to stay away from me. They don't seem to dislike me, but they seem to keep their distance. My answer is, that's what you want. I was weaving all around and trying to give you breathing room. But I've answered these kind of questions before. We're just getting right down to the heart of it. And it's, don't look to the past. It's not unconscious. It's not subconscious. There is no logical progression from your past that brought you there. Forget all that. You look at right now. If the person given me a fair description, the ordinary people keep their distance, they're doing what they are told to do. Vis-a-vis you, the wiring between you and these other people you're talking about is such that what you want is your distance kept. Now you can be thinking otherwise, which we'll assume the person was, or they wouldn't have taken the trouble to write me the note. As far as asking what to do, in any manner, any way that you can get your hands on is change your behavior with any given person or these group of people, whoever it is he has in mind. Because then you have changed the energy exchange between you two, between you and anybody. That is always the sure proof. If you need proof, that is always a way the revolutionist can see something new, is to change the way that you are dancing in some relationship, because the other person has no choice. You'll suddenly begin to see holes in their pants or in their dress or rips. You try to twirl them and you've never twirled before. You've been dancing a tango with them for 10 years and suddenly in the middle of a tango you begin to do a bolero. And you will see things you've never seen before. Do not send me your discarded friends, husbands, wives, lovers, because that is the risk you're running. I strike risk. There's just not another word. The possibility. Because anytime you change your behavior, a few of you have gotten a real cold water lesson with this years ago, some of you older people, if you recall, and you would whine and ask me, well, how about so-and-so? And what you're asking about is, I keep getting in the same kind of little argument, this same kind of scenario with this person. And so I said, all right, do so-and-so. And some of you, I would tell you specifically. I wouldn't just tell you to do something differently. I would either already have some awareness, or I'd find something specific I could say to you, of, all right, stop doing so-and-so, stop acting like that and saying that, and do this, if you want to see something new. And some of you assured me, yes, I do. And I said, be prepared for anything. And be prepared. What was prepared was, to put it bluntly, some of you, the person that you thought you were madly in love with, but there was this tension, this struggle going on, all you did was change your behavior and you suddenly lost all interest in them. Not mad, no, nothing. It was just, oh, and you just wandered off and that was the end of it. At least the problem was gone, but the source of the problem was gone. The hobby was shot. If someone is acting unreasonably, such as hostility, and someone else has an interest with that person, possibly a sexual one, they say, how would that someone else avoid entanglement? I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, that's a figure of speech. How would that person, in fact, it's not my fault, it's their handwriting. Remember that, it's not my fault. How would someone else avoid entanglement? All right, there is no way to completely. And we're back to never and avoid. Avoid's like never. How would that someone else avoid entanglement? You cannot completely avoid entanglement. In as much as anything you do that's a shared dance, a shared experience with somebody else, you're entangled. Now we're back to the same area where I can point out what I just did. At the ordinary level, to complain about somebody that you're in a relationship with, you're dancing with a hog and you're complaining about the warts. Change the dance, but be prepared to suddenly decide that you never even thought about it, but suddenly just to drop the hog and suddenly want to dance with pigeons, snakes, But do you understand what is being asked? That I have a hobby, I've got a person I'm attracted to, but there are parts of what they do I don't like. You're blind. You're just working off all intelligence. Because part of the reason is the warts, is the smell. That is the very thing that you say you don't like. And I can prove it if I must. I'm telling you how. All you got to do is change the dance. You change the dance. They're not going to change. Don't worry about that. And if you won't be more specifically, I'll tell you if you won't come to me. And I'll tell you something specifically to do. It won't be anything weird. It'll be something you can do that any human can do. I'll just tell you something specifically to do. But I won't tell you unless you give me your word you're going to do it. So don't ask me. And you go do it in your relationship. And it can be just something minor. You'll be surprised. I can pick it out. And as soon as you hear it, you'll know two things. One of them is you'll know, uh-oh, I've done it because I've stepped in it because there's no way out of this. I can do it. I can't tell them I can't do it because it'll be something that I'll just tell you to, all right, from now on, every time this situation comes up, you do and say this and that. It won't be anything weird. It'll just be the kind of thing that you don't do. And so two things will strike you. Uh-oh, I can't weasel out because I can't tell them I can't do it because I can. And the other one is, I think I've just blown the dance. Because it will come to you that, uh-oh, that the very thing you complained about, I can put an end to. All you've got to do is change your position slightly, and the other person has no choice. And what you're left with is suddenly. It's like you backed off and you've seen, like for the first time, oh my God, there's no such thing as a hog without warts. You can't, all right, you can't build model airplanes without getting glue on your fingers. And that's it, and I just never realized it. The idea of avoiding any entanglement was somebody in a specific way. That specific way that you may, through talking of action, thinking of action, the very thing that you say is an entanglement that you don't like is part of the hobby. That's so simple. It's another one of the things I can say that no man's intelligent until he can see that, because it belies everything that you know in the city. I mean, the sentence itself is insane. For me to say the very thing that you're complaining about with somebody else is part of the hobby, is part of the reason you like them. That is literally insane in the city. There is nothing in the past of humanity's intelligence that makes that a logical progression in human affairs. Contrary, it just shows that I'm insane. Because if it was not something I didn't like, why would I be asking you how to change it? Why would I say something I don't like? And then you say, well, it's something I do like. Why would I say I don't like it if I liked it? Because I like everything else about him or her. They're almost perfect except for this one thing. I can't stand it. And you tell me that I do stand it and I do like it. If I liked it, I wouldn't say I dislike it. All right, I give. You got me. See? But if you need proof and you're up for a whole new dance, all you've got to do, if you can't do it yourself, as I said, I guess I'll weaken if any of you, but I'll hold you to it. You got to do it. If you're a slip up and weaken and ask me, all you've got to do is change the step of the dance. The other person got no choice. They can't keep dancing. Not in the same way. And suddenly you and them, I can describe it in several ways, but it's like you stepped apart for a second. It's going to be this kind of thing. I've heard people describe it this way. It's like for the first time, you could have been together 10 years, but people say this. I've seen them say it even without their tongue. That for the first time in my life, I see you. Of course, they're saying us, the relationship, and they go, and they just wander off, and that's the end of it. But they see for a split second that what I said was true. The thing that you think you're complaining about is a part of the attraction. It is a part of the energy conversion. And you are wasting your energy. You're strangling yourself to stay, whether it be a question about a sexual relationship or a job or with your family, to continue to holler, there's one thing that's driving me nuts about this person, about this relationship. There ain't one thing driving you nuts. That's part of the relationship. If you can see that, it's, oh. At work, I'm too intense, it seems. Everything is a big deal. People at work even say, we like your work, but don't get so caught up in it and wound up. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right, there's no reason that people should see that about you, but if you are involved with this, there should be a kind of code of personal conduct that I already mentioned, a level of acceptance of your work, that regardless of whether they say that or not, that's just part of your hobby there. What the hell does it matter what they say? That you should not be operating in such a way that they think there's anything unusual going on with you. But you should not abandon, you'd be making a grave mistake, your own level of quality, your own code of whatever it is you're doing, but you're not doing it right if it strikes them enough that they have to say something to you. That's not being revolutionary. Being revolutionary, when we talk about being out in the bushes, is to be almost invisible. But if you're there, you are, of course, visible, but there should not be anything outstanding about you. Another part of the question, along with the above is a tendency for me to go along with letting people think all's well, and then suddenly I pitch a fit about feeling overwhelmed. Well, I will answer that again. I'll be glad to. Is see continually to the smallest detail constantly. Constantly. Every time you drop something, pick it up. Every time you know you should have closed that drawer and straightened your desk, turned off the light before you left, brought the key to the washroom back to the person that keeps it. The smallest detail, see to it continually. Not later. Not in a minute. Now. Unless you enjoy pitching periodic fits. Will you speak on, this is from a woman, will you say something about the hormonal cycles in women? And the person says how it can really lower their line level of consciousness. They're using some of my terms back, but I'll go ahead and quote them more or less. It seems to bring down, control, confine their own level of consciousness, as well as it temporarily hampers them trying to do anything involved with this, and etc. All right, again, I must point out, I am not a woman, and we'll assume she's talking about the menstrual cycle. I don't guess there's any doubt. Now, although I've never felt that, I can tell you women, since a woman asked it, and I've got to point that out, or the question wouldn't even be worth asking. But let me point out, for you women that never thought about it, there is a male counterpart to that. Aggression. And I can point out to you, and men is not necessarily running on a 28-day cycle, but it runs in cycles in men. And it has the same kind of lowering insofar as this kind of activity now. The same kind of limiting of consciousness and bringing it down. Now, I know that it's fairly a popular malady now, and I'm not discounting the syndromes and the complaints that women are now expressing. But there is an absolute, normally, I'm sure by women that you never thought about it, you complain about it, and it comes out in other ways. And society seems to complain about it. That is, life in general complains about it to some degree. But that is the aggression of men. And that is not from man's past, that is, the past in historical sense. There's not something that caused men to be. It's hormonal. Men are aggressive. And to do this, you cannot run anymore. You cannot let that kind of hormonal cycles affect you if you're a man any more than women can, although they can be obviously quite discomforted by it all and upset. You're not alone. And just when I start off by saying, although I've never felt it not being a woman, I assure you that you wouldn't want to swap it for the kind of aggression that sweeps over men. You might say you would, but if you swapped it for 1 month, you'd probably come back and say, can we renegotiate this deal? I don't mean that you'd be a lot worse off, but as far as you think, well, I got a bargain, I suggest to you that you wouldn't think it's much of a bargain. Also, the person was asking, I didn't read down toward the end, they asked something on the basis that there's some way that I can use this kind of, cyclical discomfort and the problems it gives me and driving me nuts and making me physically uncomfortable. All right, to say that everyone, male or female, should learn and can go stronger with struggling with your own hormones it's for me to declare the revolutionarily obvious. It's just that men and women, it's no big deal anymore, but men and women have different, you could say, hormonal demons. But to ask whether you could benefit from trying to struggle with it, that's kind of obvious, but it's also this. What's your alternative? That is attempting to be a revolutionist, to attempt to use the kinds of things that are just natural, what shall we call them, inconveniences, annoyances, demonic strains upon one's life and thinking. What's your choice? Either use it or be used by it, which is what happens to everybody else, which is what's the basis of the question, that people, I seem to be being used by it. I understand that. So what's the alternative? Other than expecting a magic pill from me, which most of you don't expect a magic pill from me to say, oh, all right, if it really bothers you that much, come outside after the meeting and I'll go boom, and you won't, I'll stop your periods from now on. Or I'll grab some man and say, you'll never be aggressive again, you just come here, and I go boom. Now, other than that, which there's not going to be any boom forthcoming, other than that, and here it is, you have got hormones. If you're alive, you got hormones. And they're carrying on affairs that individually have little benefit to a would-be revolutionist, such as aggression. It's one of the first things I tell all you people. You can't be hostile, you can't be critical of life after a certain fashion and get anywhere with this. If I didn't tell you it would stop, I just said you can't look at it, you can't entertain it, you can't let that be you. But as far as aggression stopping in men, it doesn't stop. Your hormones are gone. You're dead. The very things that seem to be, at least physically, and then its aftermath of tempestuous and upsetting in people, there it is. It's a given. You're alive. Then the question about should I use it, should I try to use it, you got your choice. Either use it or be used by it. Because you're going to be used by it. It's going to happen. After that, it's not. What else are you going to debate? About, well, I wonder if it's worthwhile. Who the hell knows? Now, of course, I'm being kind of rhetorical now. You can say, well, but as upset as this makes me every month, I wonder if it's worthwhile. Well, gee, I don't know. Well, yeah, I guess I do feel aggressive sometimes, but I've always been pretty aggressive, or else I'm not all that aggressive. I wonder if I'd even have any success the next time I'm really feeling aggressive, for no particular reason, but just that kind of irritation I get at times. I feel like I could go out and chew on tree bark and insult everybody. I wonder if it would benefit me if I tried to, I don't know, do something with it. I don't know. What do you think? Huh? I mean, have you ever? No? Well, hell, why start now? You know? Look at how far you've come by not doing anything with it, right? Why start? Why interfere with a good thing, right? Whatever it is in humans, whatever it is that has happened to all of us, it is, at the very basis, is, consider it this way, is whatever it is, are you going to be used by it, or are you going to use it? And what kind of choice have you got? And of course, as always, that is not necessarily the period at the end of all possibilities, but the way it stands when you have these kind of questions. That this happens to me, either it happens to me and my sex, like this question, or you could feel that something that's happened to me all my life. All my life I have been blank, whatever it is, aggressive, pitiful. Anyway, fill in the blank. All my life I've been so-and-so. And I can't seem to stop it right now. Should I try in some way use this? What's your choice? If right now you cannot seem to stop it, if you cannot seem to completely abandon it, what is your choice if you are actually a would-be revolutionist? Which if you are, you've got something, you've got some immediate potential beyond old consciousness. Just ask yourself, what choice do I have? What's there to think about? You going to study it? Think about it? Do outlines? You going to hear me talk about it some more? That maybe I'm subconsciously or subliminally, I'm trying to encourage you to perhaps go against some of these natural inclinations. No, I'm not. Do whatever you want to. What seems to be the most profitable? Well, I don't know. I've never tried the other. I continue to be afraid of loneliness and to be unable to attract a sexual partner that I wish to be with for a long haul, although I've quit trying presently. Blah, blah, blah. Well, I was just read the end of the question. I can't find anybody that I wish to be with for a long haul, although it seems as though, and it seems as though around the holidays, this is the part I was looking for, that it seems to get worse. I was just going to use that to point out, of course, with no cynicism, I wanted to point out that the person with a serious question, sincere question, even ended up by pointing out that this was written, of course, several weeks ago, that during the holidays, everything seems worse. And I wanted to point out that for the ordinary, everything always seems worse. That it's not the holidays. Although I understand the basis of the question, I'm not an idiot. But on the basis that, well, I'm feeling like I don't have the right kind of relationship, I don't have a real sexual partner now, and gee, it's even worse around the holidays. What kind of shit is that? That's city shit. Do you hear me? I'm not attacking the person that wrote the question, but that is the very same thing. That's why I started tonight, if you can see the connection. That, well, I mean, it's bad enough to sort of feel lonely. And you're looking to your past like how I ended up being Mr. or Ms. Lonely. And that's bad enough, but at certain times it's worse. At certain times in the city, it's always worse. When's that? All the time. You're making it worse to try and draw distinctions. That, yes, it is worse this time of year. No, it's not. Well, it seems to me it is. Okay, you win. I'm sorry. Really, it does. Okay, I don't think you're lying. It's true. Well, what? I agreed. We're running out of video too? Well, God bless us. Well, I guess I'll stop, won't I? Well, how about we just read a piece of one? In fact, I've already almost listened. I'm just going to read it. Their question to me, well, it's not as though all of my personal problems have vanished. They're still there, all right. And several of them still cost me more than they're worth. It's just that I don't seem to have any question about them anymore. I know them, they know me, and I know how they need to be dealt with. So maybe the question is, and I quote, what the hell am I waiting for?